The water hit her face like ice, soaking her textbooks, her clothes, her dignity. Emma Brennan sat frozen in her wheelchair as Kyle Morrison towered above her, his smirk broadcasting cruelty to everyone in the diner. Then his hand connected with her cheek. Not hard enough to cause real damage, but hard enough to leave a mark, hard enough to cross a line. What Kyle didn't know was that Emma's father had spent 30 years crossing much more dangerous lines in places where mistakes meant body bags. And Colonel David Brennan was about to teach this spoiled quarterback a lesson in consequences. The Tennessee morning broke clear and hot as Colonel David Brennan watched recruits complete their final circuit at Fort Campbell. At 61, he still commanded attention without effort. 2 inches over 6 feet, silver hair cropped military short, eyes that had seen combat across 4 continents. His presence made young soldiers run faster, stand straighter, question less. His phone vibrated. Principal's office. Emma. Incident. Come immediately. Brennan's jaw tightened. He'd been expecting this call for months, ever since Kyle Morrison and his pack had started their systematic campaign against his daughter. What began as whispered insults had escalated through stolen assignments, tampered lockers, fabricated social media accounts designed to destroy her reputation, all carefully orchestrated to stay just below the threshold that demanded administrative intervention. 12 minutes later, Brennan's rebuilt Chevy Silverado roared through Fort Campbell's gates. His daughter was brilliant, determined, already accepted to West Point's exceptional candidate program, despite, or perhaps because of, the wheelchair she'd occupied since a drunk driver crossed the median 2 years ago. She was everything her mother had been, fierce, intelligent, unbreakable, and someone had just put their hands on her. The conference room at Lincoln Academy held 5 people. Emma sat with her back straight despite the red mark visible on her face. Across from her, Kyle Morrison sprawled with practiced arrogance, his father Gregory beside him. Gregory Morrison, real estate mogul, Senate candidate, and the man who'd sold American weapons to Iraqi insurgents in 2003, while Brennan's Delta Force unit bled in the desert. "Colonel Brennan," Principal Anderson began nervously, "perhaps we can resolve this reasonably. Kyle is our star quarterback." "Your student struck my daughter," Brennan interrupted, his voice carrying the calm that preceded violence. "That's assault." Gregory Morrison leaned back, gold watch catching the light. "David, still living in the past, fighting old battles. This is my town now, my influence. Perhaps we could find a more flexible solution." Brennan studied Morrison. 20 years ago, he'd caught him red-handed, documented everything. 3 soldiers died because Morrison sold intelligence about patrol routes to the enemy. But Morrison's father was a 2-star general with Pentagon connections. The charges vanished. Morrison got a general discharge and walked free, building an empire on blood money while the families of those dead soldiers never learned the truth. "Kyle will apologize," Brennan said quietly, on his knees. "Then he and his friends will complete 200 hours of community service at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center." Kyle's face contorted. "I'm not apologizing to that." "Careful," Brennan warned, his tone dropping to something predatory. "Choose your next words with precision." Morrison stood, buttoning his expensive jacket. "My son will do no such thing. And if you persist with these ridiculous demands, I'll make your life very difficult. I have the governor's number, judges at my country club, federal prosecutors who owe me favors." Brennan reached into his pocket, retrieving a USB drive. This contains documentation of 27 separate incidents of harassment against Emma. Copies have been provided to the sheriff, the school board, and my attorney. It also contains other materials from Baghdad, Operation Desert Storm, the weapons deals you thought were buried. Morrison's confident smile faltered. "Those files were sealed, classified. Delta Force operators learned to preserve evidence," Brennan replied. Insurance policies against men who betray their country. I have multiple copies in secure locations with automatic distribution protocols should anything happen to me or Emma. The room fell silent. Morrison's face had drained of color. "Kyle," Morrison finally said, voice tight, "do as the colonel says." The quarterback looked at his father in disbelief. "Dad, you can't. Now!" Kyle Morrison sank to his knees before Emma's wheelchair, hatred and humiliation warring in his expression. "I'm sorry for assaulting you and damaging your property." Emma studied him coolly. "Apology conditionally accepted. Your actions going forward will determine whether I believe your words." As the Morrisons left, Gregory paused at the door. "This isn't over, David." "No," Brennan agreed. "It's just beginning." The Veterans Rehabilitation Center occupied a converted warehouse on Clarksville's outskirts. Brennan had helped establish it 5 years earlier, creating sanctuary for warriors the system had failed. When Kyle and his teammates arrived for their first day of community service, they found men missing limbs, bearing burn scars, confined to wheelchairs, yet radiating dignity their able-bodied tormentors couldn't comprehend. "You belong to me for 200 hours, Master Sergeant Luis Garcia announced, wheeling forward in his chair. He'd lost both legs in Afghanistan. "You will address me as sir. You will show respect to every person here regardless of rank or condition. Is that understood?" The boys mumbled agreement. "I can't hear you." "Yes, sir. Better. Now grab those mops. 22 bathrooms need cleaning." Kyle shot a resentful glance at Brennan, who stood observing, but he picked up the mop. Over the following days, something unexpected happened. Kyle found himself actually listening when Captain James Monroe, who'd lost an arm in Fallujah, described pulling his men from a burning vehicle, found himself asking questions when Lieutenant Patricia Chen explained her recovery from third-degree burns across 40% of her body. Found himself watching Emma conduct her weekly chess strategy class, commanding respect from hardened combat veterans through pure intellect and force of personality. On the 4th day, Kyle's world imploded. FBI agents arrested his father at a campaign event, bringing charges of treason, fraud, and conspiracy related to both the Baghdad incidents and recent evidence of illegal campaign contributions. Media descended. The Morrison name became synonymous with betrayal. Kyle sat alone in his bedroom that night, watching his father's disgrace play across every news channel when his phone rang. "This is Brennan," the familiar voice said. "How are you holding up?" The question, concern, rather than accusation, caught Kyle off guard. "Why do you care?" "Because you're 17 and your foundation just collapsed through no direct fault of yours." "I bullied your daughter," Kyle pointed out confused. "I targeted her because of you." "You're 17, Brennan repeated. "Old enough to know better, young enough to change course. The question is whether you want to." 15 minutes later, Kyle walked out his front door past the media encampment and climbed into Brennan's waiting truck. No words were exchanged during the drive back to the Veterans Center, just an unspoken understanding that Kyle had been offered something precious, a choice to become someone different than his father. The weeks that followed transformed Kyle Morrison in ways he couldn't have predicted. Working alongside wounded warriors, he learned that strength wasn't dominance over others, but sacrifice for them. Emma's chess lessons taught him strategic thinking that transcended simple intimidation. Lieutenant Chen's quiet dignity despite her scars demonstrated character that no amount of athletic ability could match. When his community service hours were complete, Kyle didn't stop coming. "I'd like to continue," he told Brennan one evening. "Not because I have to, because I want to." Brennan nodded. "Your choice. That matters." Meanwhile, Gregory Morrison's trial proceeded with methodical inevitability. Evidence Brennan's Delta Force colleagues had preserved for 2 decades emerged. Weapons manifests, intelligence reports, surveillance photographs, bank records showing deposits from Iraqi sources. The jury deliberated 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. 20 years in federal prison. Senate aspirations replaced by a cell. 2 years later, graduation day at West Point. Emma Brennan sat in her wheelchair among her fellow cadets, uniform immaculate, posture military perfect. The first cadet with mobility limitations to complete the modified physical requirements while exceeding all academic expectations, already designated for specialized intelligence work, utilizing her strategic abilities. In the audience, Colonel David Brennan stood at attention as his daughter rolled forward to receive her commission. Second Lieutenant Emma Brennan, United States Army Military Intelligence Corps. The little girl he'd raised alone after his wife's death had become an extraordinary officer. Her wheelchair was irrelevant compared to her character. After the ceremony, a figure in Air Force Academy dress uniform approached. Kyle Morrison, no longer the arrogant teenager who'd targeted Emma, but a young man who'd found purpose beyond his father's shadow. "Lieutenant Brennan," Kyle greeted her formally, then smiled. "Beat me to commission by 3 weeks. Army efficiency," Emma replied with matching warmth, always ahead of Air Force bureaucracy. Brennan observed their interaction with quiet satisfaction. Former adversaries transformed into allies through crisis and choice. Both had overcome substantial obstacles, Emma her physical limitations, Kyle his father's legacy, to become officers who earned their place through merit. As the celebration continued, Brennan found a moment of reflection. 30 years of military service, combat zones across 4 continents, medals documenting valor under fire. But nothing in his distinguished career had required more strategic patience, tactical precision, and moral courage than the battle fought on home soil for his daughter's future. The last warrior had completed his final mission, not on a foreign battlefield, but in the crucible of character development. Emma would carry forward his legacy of integrity and service, not through genetics, but through values demonstrated and embraced. The sun set over the Hudson River, painting West Point in golden light. 1 generation of military service concluding, another beginning. The eternal cycle of duty, honor, country continuing through new guardians facing new challenges. For Colonel David Brennan, peace came not through victory over enemies, but through the enduring legacy of a daughter who embodied everything worth fighting for, and a young man who'd chosen redemption over resentment. Mission complete.